All right, well, we talked about our offensive line in yesterday's video. We're going to go over to the defensive side of the ball and talk about our cornerbacks position. That's cornerbacks, not quarterbacks. It kind of sounds similar sometimes. So our defensive backs, the cornerbacks, not including safeties, obviously, we'll make a separate video on that. But for our cornerbacks, it's probably the biggest need on the team. Arguably, offensive line, just that one position could be a pretty big need. But the thing with cornerback is it's not even like there's really a strength here. It's all just weakness. So we could use multiple corners, let alone maybe just one would be really, really nice at this point. I want to remind you guys, we do still have a few familiar faces on the team at cornerback position. I know losing J.C. Jackson is super painful, but we still have Jonathan Jones, who has proven to be one of the best slot cornerbacks in the league. So we do have that to build around. Mills coming into his second year with the team. I know it's not the most ideal situation, especially if he has to play the number one cornerback position, but it is some things that we can use to build around. This is an interesting position. Like I mentioned, we have Jalen Mills and then Jonathan Jones, who maybe would even go over to the left cornerback or right cornerback, not even just slot, if really need be. We have Miles Bryant, who showed some flashes of obviously some promise last season. Some promise. There was some weak points as well, but definitely there was some promise. We have Jawan Williams still, who has shown some weakness and a little bit of promise at times. So that's some younger talent there with Miles Bryant, Jawan Williams. And then we have a bit of a wild card in Shaun Wade, because Shaun Wade is a player that we brought on as basically somebody who the Ravens drafted. I'm trying to see if I remember this correctly. The Ravens drafted him in like pretty high up, like the fourth or third round or something like that, if I'm not mistaken. And then they cut him, and then we signed him, or they might have traded him to us actually. Yeah, I think it was a trade. Anyway, we picked him up last season, and he never really got to play with us, so it is a bit of a wild card. I'm an Ohio State fan, a bit of an Ohio State fan. I don't have a team that I'm like 100% dedicated to in college, but I do watch Ohio State. So Shaun Wade is a player that I'm fairly familiar with. He definitely was a highly recruited high school player. I think five-star recruit, obviously extremely physically gifted. So it's going to be interesting to see if they can develop him. It wouldn't be the craziest thing that's happened with the Patriots at the cornerback position, because they're very, very good at taking these guys that are even undrafted or, taken in the 6th, 7th round and turning them into just superstar cornerbacks. So I'm sure they can do something with a guy who was like a 3rd-round pick or a 4th-round pick. But the crazy thing is that actually sometimes they tend to do better with those guys that are drafted in the 6th or 7th round, or even undrafted, rather than the guys that are drafted in the 1st or 2nd round, especially at cornerback for some reason. I remember there was a few years there where we drafted, like, every single year we would draft a defensive back in the 2nd round, and they always were busts. Like, they were never good. And then also in that same, like, 4-year period, we also would take a defensive back, whether it be safety or corner, in like the 7th round or undrafted, and every single one of them would pan out. It's so stupid how backwards it is, but you know what? It's just whatever. This is kind of the reasoning behind why I said yesterday why I would prefer us to go with a offensive lineman in the 1st round, because a cornerback in the 1st round would kind of make me nervous that could be a bust over an offensive lineman who I feel like are more consistently good. When you take them in the 1st round, you usually are getting a lesser risk on your investment, which is a big, big thing. A quarterback, I genuinely feel like cornerbacks are like 50-50 in the 1st round. It's really boom or bust. But offensive linemen, I feel like at least 75% of the time, if not more, actually pan out to be good players if they're taken in the 1st round. That's just kind of my observation. But maybe I'm wrong. People did bring up a good counterpoint that you can find offensive linemen oftentimes way more talented later in the draft. And that is true as opposed to cornerback. But again, I just think in the 1st round, the risk reward, you're getting more bang for your buck at the offensive lineman position. Whether or not you can find good players later on, you're still running a risk by drafting an offensive lineman in the 4th round. You know what I mean? You're not getting a 75% chance of getting a good player in the 4th round at any position, maybe kicker or punter. There might be a pretty good chance there. But outside of that, or fullback or something like that, outside of that, you're really not getting a good risk reward. Well, you're getting a good risk reward ratio, but the risk is still higher. And when we have a need at the offensive position, or offensive line position, better yet, you don't want to risk not having a talented guy. You want to give yourself the best shot. But then again, cornerback is a massive need too. I wouldn't mind seeing them draft a cornerback in the 1st round, and then also getting 1 or 2 later in the draft or in the offseason, or as undrafted free agent, because I feel like if we did that, there's like almost a 100% chance that at least one of them would be good enough to fill a gap at the cornerback position. So that would be really nice. And also a scenario that I think would be my favorite would be probably drafting an offensive lineman in the first round, then going with a defensive back in the second and or third round. I probably wouldn't do both. That's probably not going to happen. But maybe second or third, which second round does make me nervous because of those busts I talked about a second ago. But maybe getting one in the second round and then going with one maybe later in the draft or undrafted. So maybe like a seventh round cornerback plus an undrafted one. I feel like you run a 75+% chance of having a good offensive lineman at that point by just drafting one in the first round. Then you probably run a 75% chance of at least getting one starter caliber cornerback, which we desperately need right now. So I feel like the best chance to get both of those things is that scenario that I just played out there. Then wide receiver could be second or third round. You mix or match that with a cornerback. So in the first 3 rounds, my favorite thing would be if we see an offensive lineman taken, a cornerback taken, and a wide receiver. And probably if you're counting the fourth round, I'd probably throw a linebacker in there too. What I would love to see with the first 4 rounds. But it is interesting to note and really important to note that the Patriots don't think like I do. Otherwise, I would probably work for the Patriots. Okay, I'm just a guy on YouTube. So they think very differently than me, oftentimes. Because oftentimes I get mad at what they do and it ends up panning out way better than what I originally wanted them to do. So that's why I'm just a fan and I'm not somebody who works for the team, obviously. It's important to note that they take the actual value of that pick and then they figure out what's the best value we can get here given the players that are available right now. Because really, I can say this before the draft and say, oh, I want them to pick this position, this position, this position, this position. But the problem is that it doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things, because once the draft starts, a few of those offensive linemen that were supposed to make it all the way to the second round could already be off the board, or cornerback or wide receiver, etc. One of those positions could be going faster than expected or slower than expected, and it could allow for somebody to be there that wasn't originally supposed to be there. For instance, this kind of reminds me of Christian Barmore last season. He wasn't supposed to be there in the second round or whenever we drafted him. I think it was the early second round. But he was, and that's why we traded up to get him. If he was taken, at the end of the first round like he was supposed to, we wouldn't have traded up in the second round to go ahead and grab him when he was still on the board. So that's an example of plans changing probably. That probably wasn't a part of the plan going into the draft. It's just something that happened as the draft went on. So I think this is all really important to note that things are going to go a lot differently. It's kind of like predicting a season, record. It's like, okay, well, by week 3, there could be injuries or somebody could be looking way more talented than expected. There's so many things that could happen once things start that could change literally everything. So these videos are mostly just for fun. But I love making them. I love talking about the Patriots. I love thinking about it, getting excited about it, probably preliminarily, but whatever, like I enjoy doing this. I think people enjoy thinking about these things as well and watching these videos. So that's kind of why it just works out. Anyway, cornerback position, huge need, but I'm also very excited to see how things progress. I'm glad that 2 of our needs are offensive line and cornerback, because those seem to be the 2 positions where they're the best at addressing and just getting talent in the door all the time, and just completely replaceable for the Patriots all the time. So as long as that stays the case, it's going to be exciting to watch what they do here, and there's a good chance it's going to end up being in 2 or 3 seasons, it's probably going to be addressed in really good shape. Both the offensive line and cornerbacks would just have to be my guess based on team history for sure. Wide receiver, not so much. We'll see what happens there. I'm also excited for that position, though. There's a lot to be excited about, guys. We have a lot of talent. Obviously, this free agency has been a cheaper one for the Patriots as there was limited cap space, so that wasn't as exciting as obviously last offseason. But the draft is going to be very exciting, I can assure you that. And then another thing that's exciting is looking towards the offseason of 2023, we're going to have far more cap room. We're going to have people to re-sign, but I think we're going to be left with more cap to go ahead and sign some folks than we would have this offseason, obviously. I think we're going to have far more money, and we might see more exciting moves over the next few seasons as opposed to this one. This one's the one where we really had to save some money and go on a budget mode. But we're set up for the future where things are set up nicely, where I don't think that's going to have to be the case in the future. Like for teams like Kansas City, or even Buffalo now, you could put in that category, where they've spent so much and created such long contracts that, they might get into some troubled situations for prolonged periods of times because they've gone for a win now mentality. Or the Rams. The Rams are a great example of that too, but they seem to just be, pulling money out of everywhere, where you wouldn't even expect it. But this team isn't built like that really, and it was a 1-year budget year, and it looks like cap is going to be, really, really expanding really rapidly our cap space that we're going to have. So we're going to be back in a position to go ahead and address more needs in the future, which is really exciting to think about. So anyway, I got really off topic on this video. Cornerbacks, there is some young players with potential like Sean Wade, Miles Bryant, Juwan Williams, those players that are, probably one of them out of the three, I would say, is going to be on the team for quite a bit of time. I would say the odds are that one of them will be, one of those rotational corners that ends up being pretty good. But the odds are also that two of them just really won't end up ever being anything. So they're that kind of caliber young players. Juwan Williams actually was one of those second-round cornerbacks. And obviously he's not one of our starting cornerbacks, so it hasn't panned out as good as you would think for a second-round cornerback. At least not as good as the team expected. Miles Bryant's shown some promise, and then Sean Wade is the big wild card where it's probably really could pan out really well and be surprisingly good, or just never anything. So we'll just have to wait and see. I think the cornerback position needs to be addressed, otherwise it's going to be a massive weakness this season. But again, I'm excited to see what they do. Anyway, guys, thank you for watching this video. Be sure to smash the like button. Leave a comment down below what your thoughts are on this video and this topic. Let me know what you think of the cornerback position. And let me know if you agree or disagree with my draft, like pre-draft for fun analysis that won't end up being accurate, really. It might be semi-accurate, but it won't be perfect, obviously. Let me know what your thoughts are and if you disagree or agree. And be sure to subscribe to the best Patriots content on YouTube. I'll see you guys in the next one.